No, you're okay.
Greetings and thank you all for joining. My name is Sam McGill. I'm a senior facilitator and mediator with Sacramento State University's College of Continuing Education. Really appreciate you joining this first meeting of the West County Water Quality and Recycled Water Supply Feasibility Study, first meeting of the Stakeholder Committee Before I hand it over to Ken Gilfie, Director of Engineering for Sonoma Water, for some opening remarks, I just wanted to run through a couple of Zoom protocols. I would ask if you could please keep yourself on mute throughout the discussion, unless you are directly addressing the group. If you'd like to be unmuted throughout the discussion, please use the hand raise feature. You can find that by clicking on the reactions button on your Zoom ribbon. Click hand raise and we will go to you next in the conversation queue. We'll have a number of breaks for discussion throughout the day, but we will kind of run through each agenda item and then break for discussion, first from folks who received a committee invite and then from general members of the public who may be joining us here this afternoon. The other thing I would note is the meeting is being recorded. We just do that so that we can build out a really accurate meeting summary of sort of key takeaways and assignments for future meetings. If you are uncomfortable with the meeting being recorded, please just let me know, and I can remove you from the meeting if you prefer. As I said, we will certainly be keeping a really detailed record of the session throughout the meeting today. With that, I want to go ahead and hand it over to Kent. As I mentioned, Kent is the Director of Engineering for Sonoma Water. Kent, go ahead and take it away.
Great, thanks, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to extend a welcome to everybody, our committee members, and any public or other interested parties that might be participating. As Sam mentioned, this is our stakeholder committee meeting for Russian River County Sanitation District's West County Water Quality and Recycled Water Supply Feasibility Study. I really want to extend a thank you to our committee members who either expressed an interest in wanting to be a part of this committee or that otherwise were willing to serve after our team had reached out to you. So very much appreciated, and thank you to the staff and consultants that are going to be involved in this process as well. This kickoff meeting is the first of a series of planned committee meetings between now and the completion of a feasibility study that the Russian River County Sanitation District is conducting that takes us into 2026. But we're going to look at that schedule more closely. So just thank you for those who are agreed to be on the committee and the commitment that's involved with that. I think we're going to go around and do introductions momentarily. However, I do believe that most people are aware of the basic origin of this feasibility study arising out of a settlement agreement that the Regional Water Quality Board had for some sanitary sewer overflow spills that Russian River County Sanitation District incurred due to the 2019 storm events. Paris Du, Hushi Al-Sadat, is going to cover that a bit for us in a bit, talk a little bit more about our background, objective, and purpose of this feasibility study, while Sam is kind of covering more our role and function of this committee today. We do have a couple of consultant teams engaged, West Yost doing the technical side of this, and Sacramento State University College of Continuing Education involved in our outreach and our facilitation. So thank you to everyone there. Lastly, I'll just say I think it's well recognized that the management of wastewater in West County poses significant challenges, sometimes involving hard discussions and decisions in our efforts to protect both public health and our environmental health, the river health, and trying to do so in an affordable and sustainable manner while we contend with things like aging infrastructure, evolving regulations, climate change, natural hazards, and we have small wastewater systems with small rate bases, some unsewered communities out there challenged with outdated systems. So plenty of challenges for us. And with this effort, we're aiming at trying to look at some potentially feasible solutions that might be offered by combining some of these small systems or portions of these systems in some sort of regional fashion that may benefit some or all of these communities and the sanitation entities and their customers. So It does feel like we have a tall order in front of us. That's not necessarily going to be easy. Certainly no silver bullets, but having you all participate today is a great start. So thank you very much again for that. And thank you for your interest. Thank you in advance for your feedback. So with that, Sam, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks, Kent. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our agenda today. As Kent mentioned, this is really the kickoff meeting. The main purpose of this is to ground all of you in the same information at the same time in things like the study background, the overall purpose of this effort and the schedule. And then also, as Kent mentioned, we want to fill in our stakeholder committee members a little bit on what they can expect in terms of what some of their fellow committee members have shared with us so far. And what their role will be moving forward. We also want to make sure that we have plenty of time for discussion with all of you on some of the concepts and background information that you'll hear throughout the day. So it's not directly reflected in here, but we do expect to take a conversation break after each one of these agenda items. Stu from Sonoma Water will present on the study background, purpose, and schedule. We'll break for discussion there for a moment. And then I'll run through the stakeholder committee background, roles, responsibilities, and a little bit about what we heard during the stakeholder assessment that was conducted in July and August of this year. And again, we'll break for discussion there. It'll be a consistent theme throughout all of our meetings, but we always want to close out with a recap of any sort of high-level takeaways or assignments and things that hopefully some of you will volunteer to help out with as we move forward. And it's our goal to get you out of here no later than 6 p.m. So really appreciate everyone joining today. You'll note that right now, you are able to mute and unmute yourselves. As I mentioned right at the outset here, I would just ask that you keep yourselves on mute unless you're actively speaking to the group. If we start hearing a lot of background noise, I'll go ahead and mute everybody, and you'll just have to use that little hand raise function to join the queue. But since we're not a huge group today, I'm hoping we can all just use good Zoom behavior and hopefully cut down on some of that background distraction. So before we jump into Stu's presentation, I'd love to go around the room and do a quick round of introductions. I'm going to just read off the names that I'm seeing on the list. If you could unmute yourself and tell us who you are, what organization is bringing you here today, and whether you were contacted to join the committee, that would be wonderful. And if you weren't, tell us a little bit about where you're coming from in the West County and what interested you about joining this session. We would ask that you keep your comments pretty brief, just a few seconds, since we have a good number of folks to get through. We'll start at the top with Andrea Rodriguez. Andrea.
Hi, I'm the communications manager with Sonoma Water and part of the outreach team. So you'll be in touch with me if you need anything from Sam or Ann and I. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Ann Dubé.
Thanks, Sam. I'm Ann Dubé, and I work part-time for Sonoma Water, and I'm assisting Andrea and helping with some of the communications.
Thanks, Ann. Steve Tripp.
Hi, I'm Steve Trippy, and I am co-chair of the Lower Russian River Wastewater Solutions Citizens Advisory Group, also called the CAG. We've been looking at these issues for, we're going on our 6th year now. So I think I was invited. Hi, Ann.
Thanks so much for joining, Steve. And one thing I'll note, we'll walk through the committee roster later. You'll notice that we're still filling it out. So membership is not currently set. We certainly encourage and invite more folks to join as well. Especially if you represent a little niche that might not be filled so far, but we'll talk about that later in the agenda. Steve, thanks for joining. Let's go next to Alexis Verberkmos.
Hi, I'm a resident of the Lower Russian River and really interested in both the wastewater side, but also the water capture and flood related aspects of this. And I was invited to be on the committee. And just a little side note, coming in from overseas, so if I cut off, I'll keep trying to join, though the Wi-Fi is pretty reedy over here. Thank you.
Hey. Well, thanks for making the trip all the way from overseas. We'll go next to Brenda Adelman. Brenda?
Brenda Edelman. I too am a member of the CAG and have been on it the whole time. I'm also head of a small group called Russian River Watershed Protection Committee. And we got started on the issues, water quality and sewer issues when the Russian River's County Sanitation District was being planned to be built. It wasn't built yet. So we've been around for about 45 years, and I have tracked situations with the sewer district and problems since that time. And I've worked on other river issues as well during that time. So I guess I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks so much, Brenda. And I note that Brenda was invited to join the committee as well. We'll go next to Carlos Diaz.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Carlos Diaz, Deputy Director of Engineering, overseeing capital projects for Sonoma Water and working closely with Paris, Kent, Andrea, and the team on this effort. Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Carlos. Chad Davison.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chad Davison. I am representing two agencies that are included in the study. One is the Grayton Community Services District, and one is the Forestville Water District. So I'm currently managing those two agencies and have been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to at least be ancillarily aware of all of this since the process started. And so I look forward to it. And I'm not sure if I was actually invited to be on the committee or not, but I think I was.
You were indeed. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chad. Dan Fain.
Hi, Dan Fine. I'm co-chair along with Steve Trippy of the Lower Russian River CAG. And I've been in touch with these issues for quite a long time. Before this, I chaired a committee associated with the Russian River Redevelopment Committee that was looking at solutions for wastewater in the Monterey, Guerneville, Rio Negro area, including Villa Grande. So, and I think I invited myself.
You're very welcome to be here today. Thanks so much, Dan. All right. Next up, Emma Walton. Emma?
Hi, my name is Emma Walton. I work with Sonoma Water as the operations manager over water and wastewater.
Thanks, Emma. Frank Mello? Frank, can you introduce yourself? All right, we'll come back to Frank in a moment. We'll go next to Gary Helfrich.
Gary Helfrich. I'm director of the Campmaker Rec and Park District, which is also a county water district. We provide water services throughout the Dutchville Creek watershed and have been partnering with Occidental on water issues right now, but we're also going to be working with them on wastewater solutions. Not to, I guess, throw our hat in the ring on this, but we do have latent sewer powers that LAFCO has not activated yet, but I'd rather have the water agency take care of things.
Well, that is certainly something we're going to be discussing extensively in the coming months. Thanks, Gary. George Lincoln.
Hi, everyone. George Lincoln. I am your operations engineer over the Russian River Treatment Plant. Been involved with it for the last 10 plus years. I'm very familiar with it and the district, and also with on-site wastewater systems. Happy to be here.
Thanks, George. Harry Gordon. Harry, can you introduce yourself? All right, we'll keep moving. Let's see. Catherine Geese.
I'm unmuting. Hold on. Oh, there we go. Hi, Catherine Geese. I'm an engineer with West Coast Associates. I'm the project manager for the technical evaluation.
Thanks, Catherine. Let's see, we heard from Kent earlier. I'll go next to Kyla Brook.
Hello, thank you so much. Kyla Brook. I'm also a member of the CAG. I started working on wastewater issues a little later than Dan, about 2005. I am a local realtor in the West County area. I specialize in that, so I see a lot of all sorts of different things. And I also own multi-unit rental properties in West County, which has its own unique issues that don't get talked about a lot.
Great, thanks, Kyla. Just a couple, last up, but certainly not least, Parastu Hushiel Sadat. Sorry, Parastu.
No problem. Good afternoon. My name is Parastu Hushiel Sadat, and I work in the engineering and resource planning of Sonoma Water. I am managing the Vestios agreement for the feasibility study of this project.
Wonderful. And with that introduction, thanks for that, Parastu. I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to walk through the study background, purpose, and schedule.
Sure. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, as Kent mentioned before, the Russian River County Sanitation District has a settlement agreement with the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board that includes an Enhancement Compliance Action, or ECA. So the ECA consists of a high-level feasibility study, which is coupled with this stakeholder program to address wastewater challenges in the West County. The scope of the feasibility study includes four main topics. The first one is assess the feasibility and benefits of multiple potential regionalization options. Number two is to evaluate the potentials for regional projects to serve a small, rural, and potentially disadvantaged communities. Topic three is assess the amount of recycled water that could be available for reuse through wastewater and or recycled water regionalization. And finally, evaluate the benefits of regionalization on climate adaptation and resiliency. In September 2023, the district solicited proposals from different consultants for this feasibility study in response to the proposed order. We selected Vestios, and you just heard from Catherine, as the consultant for the feasibility study in October of 2023. The North Coast Regional Board had a hearing and finalized the order in December of 2023. In the January of this year, the North Coast Regional Board approved our request for timeline revisions, and then we took the consulting agreement, the Vestios agreement, to our board and executed the agreement in April of this year. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the map of the study area. So the study area includes the boundaries of the four major sanitation districts, including the Russian River County Sanitation District, Occidental County Sanitation Districts, which both of them are operated by Sonoma Water. And then we have Grayton Community Services District and Forestville Water Districts that we have. Chad presented them in this meeting. And then it also contains the kind of boundaries and areas of unserved communities that kind of per ECA, we should include the disadvantaged communities of Hacienda, Hollydale, Camp Meeker, and Guerneville. The boundary of Monterio Villa Grande is also shown on this map as a separate polygon, since a feasibility study is currently undertaken to analyze different wastewater collection and treatment alternatives for that area. We will utilize the findings of that analysis in our regionalization recommendations. Then next slide, please. The ECA has a specific dates for delivering different tasks to the North Coast Regional Board. We awarded the Vestios Consultant Agreement in April of 2024. The scope of the Vestios Agreement includes all the assessments needed to fulfill the requirements of the ECA that I mentioned previously. Those four main topics. The specific workshops and deliverables will be discussed later in today's presentation in more detail. The draft feasibility study will be ready in November 2025, and the feasibility study should be finalized by May of 2026. That concludes my part of the presentation. I'm going to turn it back to you, Sam. Thank you.
Fair, Stu. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and pause for questions. I know there were just a few brief slides there, but the information that Stu presented was really, really critical. It sort of sets up everything that we're talking about for the rest of the day today. So what I'd like to do is invite first folks who received an invite from Andrea or myself to join the committee to answer any questions, and then members of the public feel free to jump in as well. As you heard, there are a number of staff members here who may be able to answer your questions. If we can't answer your question today, though, we're taking detailed notes and we'll make sure to get an answer to you in advance of the next meeting. So let me go ahead and pause here, and I'll actually go back to the first slide that Stu mentioned that just has this basic background information in it. Any questions from the group?
How do we get recognized? This is Brenda.
Yeah, Brenda. So we'll start with Gary. Gary used the little hand raise feature, and then we'll go to Brenda next. Gary, go ahead.
Is there some source or a single source of comprehensive information both on water quality in the lower Russian River and the tributaries, and also the performance of OTS on private property? It'd be really useful to see that data aggregated together. I know that there are water samplings done at the end of Dutchbill Creek, but it hasn't been done in 10 years along the main stem of Dutchbill Creek, from what I know, but other agencies may be doing this water testing. But I think one thing before we attack a problem is to have as much data as possible to understand the scope of the problem.
All right. So any response to Gary's question from staff?
Gary, I don't know of any comprehensive location at which to find that data, but it seems to me the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, as part of their TMDL development, would have aggregated as much of that data as is available to kind of frame the problem statement. But that's the best I got.
Yeah, I think that's some of our frustration, is that the regional board's data is not particularly comprehensive and is not fine-grained enough to actually make the determinations of where the problems are most acute. And then there's also records we could get from Permit Sonoma on where we're seeing failures of on-site wastewater systems. I mean, putting that data together with analysis of the condition of the creeks and streams in the main stem of the river, I think is very important. Because the regional board seems to just take a brute force approach to things. It's like, we'll do 600 feet. We don't have any data really to support that, but that sounds like a good number. So that's, I'd like to take a more nuanced approach to fixing the problem.
Comment. Thanks, Gary. Let's go next to Brenda.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I am interested in some of the background documents that you mentioned. The enhanced compliance action, I think everyone on the committee might be interested in that. I would like to point out that the money for this project, some of us feel should have gone to fixing Guerneville's system, which West Yost has determined may need as much as $50 million worth of repairs on the collection system mainly. And there was feasibility study mentioned, a consulting agreement. Can some of those preparatory documents be available to the committee for background information on where the staff is coming from in terms of vision and plans, et cetera, and also information from West Yost that is available already, giving some of the problems of the county sanitation district.
Staff, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we can certainly circulate the ECA to the full committee, and I believe link to it on the website as well. Is that accurate?
But also feasibility study and consultants agreement. I think that's all public information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I expect we could provide the information that Brenda is looking for. I think it's not just about the ECA, but about other projects we've looked at or worked on for Russian River CSD.
Great.
And just
so
one point of clarification there, Brenda, that the $50 million was, I think you're referring to the Headworks Force Main lift station feasibility study. Well, really preliminary engineering report that was completed by West Yost. And that did not address the collection system. That was strictly focused on lift stations, force mains, and the headworks at the wastewater treatment facility. Not the gravity sewer collection system. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, I was aware of that, but what I'm trying to get at, I wasn't clear about, was the general information. It doesn't have to be the whole document, because I don't think the committee would be interested in seeing all the details, but just the general information in the early chapter 2 of any of the study documents, just to give us a picture of what West Yost's findings and a general idea of what the work was that they were looking at. And it could be pretty general. I don't think people want to see all the pictures and detailed engineering calculations, et cetera.
Understood. Thanks.
So we'll work to get those documents out to the group in advance of your next meeting.
Thank you.
So can I also mention that for this project and all the related project, we have a web page, and each project has like its own link. That each link, especially for that the Russian River Headworks lift station and force main, we have all the documents in that web page.
And we'll share some of those links at the end of the presentation, and of course include them in follow-up communications to all of you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Chad.
Hello, I just was curious. So the ECA language of the requirements of what the purpose of the feasibility study is, it's very sort of general and sort of open-ended. So I was just curious, like, how is staff determining, or the consulting team with West Yost, how are you determining and sort of ranking the objectives of the priority? You know, what's a higher priority? Are we, you know, when we look at this feasibility, is the goal to get people that are not currently served, you know, but with failing septic systems served? Is that, where does that priority fit with, when compared to increasing the availability of recycled water? And how does all that fit with managing costs and equity when you've got differences in fees because you've got different sized communities? I guess when I'm just curious about the entire approach of when you look at all of this, how are you determining what is the most important sort of objective to, and ranking those?
I think those are really good questions, Chad, and I certainly welcome any part of the team to help chime in on this. But my take on it is that those are some of the issues that we need to figure out, working with the technical team and the stakeholder group as to where we think those priorities ought to be. So we'd certainly welcome the committee's input on some of that. But as to the regional board, unless anybody else has got another opinion on this, I don't believe any of those priorities have necessarily been expressed to us from the regional board. So I feel like we're going in looking at them on an even keel, but we're open to considering where we think those priorities ought to be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions about some of the introductory material? The proposed.
Trippy, I don't seem to have a little hand. It's more of a
Oh,
question.
that's, please, yes.
Just a question and a caution that comes from it. As we've gotten down the road on the project out here in Monterey Villa Grande, the question of financing, cost, and frankly, feasibility of even doing anything has become, in my mind and others, just sort of a huge question and barrier. And so any kind of study that looks at what can be done without the support of something other than individuals needs to be important. The impact on the individual homeowner, landowner, OTS owner needs to be considered. And I see that in the analysis.
That's a really important point. When we get to a little bit on the assessment work that we conducted back in July and August, that was a consistent thing that I heard from everybody that I spoke to. So cost is clearly going to be a major, if not the deciding factor for many of these actions.
And Brenda's sharing of the Yost assessment of the one plant's problems at 50 million is a drop in the bucket as to what it might take to do something like this, which might be the right idea. It's just, I don't know where the money's going to come from. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any additional questions? Okay. Well, we'll keep moving. We can always come back to it. We're doing great on time so far. So the next thing I wanted to run through was a stakeholder committee assessment that we conducted back in July and August of this year. The purpose of this assessment was to better understand many of the activities that all of you are and have been involved in for a very long time, and how it might, how your perspective might impact the study itself as we really kind of kick this process off and get moving. So I have a few slides that I wanted to run through, just to give you a brief overview here. The purpose of the assessment was to determine the feasibility of engaging the local community members and better understand all of your shared concerns and some of the solutions to the issues identified in the ECA. We reached out to about 25 folks throughout the region and conducted seven interviews. I will note that if you were contacted and just didn't have time or our schedules didn't line up for whatever reason, I'm always happy to talk, and I'll provide my contact information a little bit later. But I've often found that it's really useful, in addition to these larger group formats, to have access and just provide one-to-one information as well. That said, even though we had kind of a limited number of interviews, we got a pretty good cross-section of interests and organizations represented, including many of the public wastewater managers throughout the project area, county staff, LAFCO, residents, and members of the business community. So it was great to hear from kind of diverse set of perspectives. We really focused the questions on four main areas. That was understanding of current wastewater management and challenges, and some of those have already been raised today. What you all see as the potential solutions to some of the challenges, limitations of those solutions, and then what we need to do in terms of outreach and coordination, both with the community and with other ongoing wastewater and recycled water efforts. You'll see in just a moment that the assessment report we developed and delivered to Sonoma Water presents an aggregated overview of interview findings. And that was really intended to keep individual responses confidential, and then a series of outreach recommendations, including some of the suggested committee membership that we'll walk through in a moment here. So what did I actually hear when I spoke to all of you? A lot of this is going to sound very similar to everything you just heard. I'm guessing none of it's really going to jump off the page and surprise anyone. But when asked about everyone's understanding of current wastewater management and challenges, not surprisingly, we heard that aging and outdated infrastructure is periodically unable to handle wastewater during large storms. That was sort of the genesis for this entire effort in the first place. So that's not surprising that it was sort of the number one thing that popped up. Also heard that climate change has exacerbated an already, periodically insufficient wastewater collection system. I heard that a significant portion of residents and businesses in the project area in unsewered communities may rely on outdated septic systems. And then kind of more on the recycled water side, we heard that during drought, the reliance on potable water for irrigation and industrial uses can reduce total water supplies and impact water conservation efforts. And then finally, one of the other big challenges that we heard is that ratepayers may end up paying the fees for unauthorized discharges. And Brenda, you kind of alluded to this earlier. There was a concern raised that proceeds from fees and fines don't necessarily pay for system upgrades and wastewater mitigation. So that was just a few of the challenges that we heard from all of you. We then asked you all about potential solutions to some of these challenges. Very similar to the overall purpose of this feasibility study effort. Several of you mentioned that a regionalized approach linking the CSDs in the project area with larger systems in Santa Rosa or Sebastopol could be a viable option in the future. There's a possibility to consolidate unsewered communities and link them to existing CSDs. There was a suggestion that we really should be working to provide funding through grants or forgivable loans for unsewered residences to replace and upgrade their septic systems to comply with current water quality standards. I heard that there's a real need to increase the availability of recycled water supplies to offset use of potable water for irrigation and industrial uses. And then finally, and this is kind of an interesting and really specific one, there was a suggestion that there could be an effort to reclassify spill types at the Regional Water Board to ensure that funds from penalties and fees are returned to the impacted areas. So again, this gets back to that idea of using fines within the project area specifically to address, provide physical solutions to some of the challenges that you identified. I'll note that the solutions that you see up here don't by any means represent consensus across all of the interviewees. The presentation really just focuses on specific solutions that some of you provided. And one other final note on recycled water. I did hear from one respondent who believed that linking CSDs to larger systems and returning recycled water to impact areas would reduce the overall discharge of wastewater through the region. So just kind of an added benefit. I know I'm racing through these, but I do have several slides and want to mostly hear from you. So the solutions are all great, but I also heard quite a bit of information on what potential limitations of those solutions could be. As Steve mentioned, every single person I talked to agreed that cost is the #1 limiting factor to any solutions. There were multiple layers to that comment that I heard throughout all of the interviews that I conducted. A number of participants said that the current ratepayer base within the project area might not be sufficient to cover a large regionalized approach to connect both small wastewater systems and unsewered communities to larger areas with the capacity to treat more wastewater. So really Santa Rosa or Sebastopol. I also heard that although demographics are shifting within the project area, historically, the West County has a number of disadvantaged or low-income communities, and any rate increases could be really challenging for a lot of residents, particularly if they're pretty sizable. And Steve, you kind of alluded to this as well. And then finally, the other note that I heard on cost was, there's a belief out there that overall costs and rate increases might not be equitably distributed across the project area. And by that, I believe folks meant that larger community service districts may experience a smaller rate increase, and especially if they already have sewer connections, whereas unsewered communities or new customers might experience, very, very significant increases depending on what the final suite of solutions is. So that was just a little bit on cost that I heard. Also not surprising, and you all know it better than anybody else, the geography of your region poses challenges to a regionalized approach. There are 2 primary transportation corridors, and there are obviously significant mountains and forested areas that could pose construction challenges depending on what the ultimate solution is. One consistent thing that I heard, and I should note that I heard kind of folks on both sides of this argument. There's a perception out there of sort of the rural nature of the West County versus increased sewer connections and the potential for that to lead to more growth. Some of the people that I talked to were very much in favor of maintaining the current rural nature and really did believe that increased sewer connections would lead to an explosion in growth. And other folks said, it's possible that sewer connections could lead to some growth, but again, there's kind of limiting factors just by the geography of the area itself that don't lend to, a significant explosion in the number of housing units available or buildable area within the project boundaries. So just kind of interesting that there was some disagreement on that point. A number of folks cautioned that any construction could lead to really prolonged disruption to the 2 primary transportation corridors from potential pipeline construction or other things that might negatively impact the project area for a significant period of time. I also heard that connecting some unsewered residences could inadvertently dewater vegetation. So I believe the thinking here was that in some of the leach fields for existing septic systems out there actually do provide irrigation to surrounding vegetation, and if they were plugged into sewer lines, those trees and plants would not have any water. So something to consider and something I certainly hadn't heard before. And then finally, the last sort of consistent theme that I heard on limitations of solutions were around governance issues. Governance for any consolidated system could be an issue for some communities based on what I heard. Some of the smaller communities might prefer local control over wastewater services to maintain their rural nature. And as one respondent noted, the current Russian River County Sanitation District is governed by the Sonoma Water Board of Directors. One possibility for moving forward with a regionalized approach could be to expand district board seats to include local representatives, basically, providing increased local control of district issues. I should note, I mentioned that LAFCO was one of the groups I spoke to as well. And they mentioned that, LAFCO has really worked hard to consolidate small districts and limit the number of new districts or fragmentation or the fragmenting of existing districts as much as possible. And that future governance, one consideration should be to consolidate wherever possible to reduce administrative overhead and any overlapping jurisdictions. And again, I just want to stress, this is what I heard directly from interviews. It's not backed up, it's not backed up in the study documents. It's not an official position by any of the agencies involved, but it's just some of what I heard during all of the discussions I had. Real quickly on some of the things that folks mentioned, we needed to keep in mind while conducting outreach. First and foremost was how important it will be to continue to coordinate this effort with other ongoing efforts out there. You heard a few of those, about a few of those earlier. Just off the top of my head, there's the Occidental Community Service District and Grayton Sewer Transfer Pipeline Process, on-site wastewater treatment system, the mapping, study, and analysis, Russian River pathogen reduction. There's a number of different efforts that are happening out there, and the Monterey Villa Grande feasibility study. So, it's going to be really important that as this West County feasibility process moves forward, that it's in alignment with what's coming out of some of those other work products as well. I did hear from basically everybody. You all thought that formation of a committee was a really good idea to ensure local feedback on any solutions. So excited that all of you came out today for this first meeting, and really hope we can get you to stay involved in it. In terms of virtual versus in-person meetings, I did hear that most folks are pretty comfortable in a virtual format these days. And I know that tends to boost output, boost participation, especially on weekday meetings. But I also heard that it's going to be important throughout the process to have at least a couple of in-person meetings and kind of broaden our outreach to the community, through the community, and make sure that folks who aren't as comfortable in an online format are able to join in person too. So I could certainly foresee, some of our future events being held virtually, some in-person meetings, and perhaps if we can figure out how to make it work pretty seamlessly, some type of hybrid session where folks could join either virtually or in person. Many of you mentioned that meetings should be held right around this time of day to maximize participation. And then you also provided membership recommendations, which I will get to in just a moment. All right, I already covered most of this. So based on everything you heard, and I won't walk through each one of the bullets here, we provided some outreach recommendations around how to hold meetings, how to make decisions, how to make sure that all meetings are accessible and open to the public. And then again, make sure that all efforts are coordinated, not just within this effort, but with those other efforts as well. All right. As far as committee membership went, I mentioned this right at the outset of the meeting, but our recommendation from Sacramento State is to limit committee membership to a good representative cross-section of community interests. We're really shooting for kind of 7 to 15 members. I believe we have 7 folks on today, but we're looking to draw from as many of the following categories as possible. Local residents from major communities, and I'm really glad to see that I think we have many of the communities represented here from kind of the local resident and business perspective. We really wanted to make sure that we had community service districts represented. I know that there's a couple who aren't here today, and we continue to outreach to them to hopefully get them on board as well. We'd love to get some representatives from some of the nearby larger cities, as well as get a county official or their designee. And I will note that there is a county representative. He was just unavailable today and will be joining future meetings. And then there was the possibility of some other representatives as well, around potential federal and state resource agencies. Although I should note that one of the folks I spoke to mentioned that it may slow things down if state resource agencies are directly involved in the committee process. Again, this is just kind of a suggestion. But then also include local nonprofits. And specifically, there's a suggestion to invite folks from some of the various Friends of the River group. So as you can see, the committee is still very much a work in process. If you, if you're interested in joining and didn't receive an invite, or if you know folks who really kind of fit the bill nicely in one of these general buckets, get them in touch with us. We'd be happy to add them onto the mailing list and get them up to speed pretty quickly here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause here. Again, this was just feedback that I heard from all of you. And a couple of recommendations that we came up with based on your input. But I'd love to hear any suggestions, any modifications, or if you said something and you don't think it was accurately reported, please go ahead and chime in. Any thoughts on what some of your fellow committee members had to say? Gary, please.
I just want to echo that it's a good idea to have other representatives there. And even though it might bog things down a little bit, I think it's absolutely critical to have somebody from the regional board there, because what can we do if they don't agree with what it is we're going to do? I mean, they're a critical regulatory agency.
Yeah, we actually spoke about that at some length, and Andrea and Peristu, I know we and Kent as well, we talked about whether or not the regional board should be represented directly on the committee. There was some discussion because ultimately this work product is being delivered to them. There was a concern that having them represented on the committee, they'd basically be making a recommendation to themselves, if that makes sense. But Andrea, Ann, and Peristu, I don't know if you have any thoughts on Gary's suggestion, because they certainly need to be involved and have been invited to the meetings. It's just a matter of whether or not they're officially kind of on the committee making recommendations or in that kind of informational and advisory role. And I don't know, staff, if you have any thoughts on Gary's good suggestion there.
Right. Yeah, Sam, you summarized it perfectly. And also because we provide regular updates to the regional board, so they would have a time to provide any feedback at those report intervals. But again, we can keep it open.
Steve.
Yeah, I can say that having the board involved in our work in the West County Monoreal Villa Grande project has been both a little constricting, but also really good. I mean, they've been very, very helpful. They've listened to us. In a couple of occasions, the board has looked at some of their language and changed it as a result of our input. On the other hand, I think having regulatory agencies involved limits innovation, which is the other thing I want to say I thought was missing, in that this process ought to look at things we don't know about that are going on in other parts of the country and the world, frankly, in terms of wastewater treatment. Because locally, our local approved wastewater options for homeowners are limited, and they're limited by our local regulatory agency and by the state. And there are other communities that are doing, in other places in the world, that are doing different things that we don't know enough about. So I would hope we would look at those things.
And I wonder, and there's certainly, when I run through the schedule for the committee in just a moment here, there's certainly room for bringing in, perhaps outside experts from, like you said, groups that aren't necessarily subject to local requirements. And I wonder about getting some presentations from those folks. If you have any suggestions on people we should reach out to, just to get some additional information in front of the committee, I'm sure we can fit that in.
Yeah, we can do that offline, or I could do it now, whatever.
Yeah, let's, if you're okay with that, let's touch base offline.
Sure.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, any other thoughts?
This is Catherine from West Coast. I think I would like to clarify just one thing for this committee, just to be aware that the study that we are doing doesn't involve like looking at alternative on-site treatment technologies or, you know, smaller, you know, kind of cluster community systems. We are truly focused on identifying regional strategies for wastewater treatment, and that is the focus and scope of our work. So I just want to make sure, just based on the last comment, that everybody is clear about that, of like kind of what this study is required to look at and focused on.
Catherine, I'm hopefully I'm correct in saying there are other efforts happening. For example, the Monterey Villa Grande study that's looking at exactly what you
That's
just
right.
mentioned.
That's right. So we are looking at bringing in, you know, we are asked to be looking at unsewered populations and how they could be incorporated into a regional solution. But this scope is kind of specifically focused around that, you know, looking for regional strategies for managing wastewater and what those might be.
Well, and presumably that just highlights again the importance of coordinating between this effort and those other efforts to make sure that all of the various solutions are lining up as much as possible. Carl, and then over to Brenda. Carlos, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Catherine said. I mean, the scope of what we're looking at is really in response to this enhanced compliance action, which is pretty explicit in what we need to look at, not to minimize what you've said, Steve. I agree with a lot of what you said and think those things should be looked at. Particularly in some of these other ongoing studies that are going on. I would also say we're, you know, in the Monterey Villa Grande study, for example, and some of these other ongoing efforts, we are, you know, we're not the regulatory agency. We're somewhat limited by what Permit Sonoma has approved in its OTS manual, and the regional board is certainly a player in that as well. So I certainly encourage folks to reach out to those entities with any background references, information about alternative solutions. But we are limited to, you know, looking at what is outlined and approved within the county.
All right, Brenda.
Yes, I have two quick comments based on a few comments that were made. First of all, there is no river discharged of wastewater into the Russian River or the creeks between May 15th and October 1st. So in terms of water quality, whatever is going wrong in the river is not directly caused or even indirectly caused by wastewater discharges. The other point I wanted to make is that in terms of irrigation, people may think that irrigation, that storing the wastewater in the summertime is sometimes a problem if there's too much water and there was a need to do a lot of irrigation. And I think that's a fine use of the wastewater if it's financially feasible. If the pipes go too far away from the treatment plant, the expenses go up. But the other point I want to make is that when we are in drought, there is very little wastewater, much less wastewater to irrigate with, so that people think that they will rely on wastewater, treated wastewater for irrigation. It may be very limited. And there have been times where the city of Santa Rosa, in fulfilling their contract of sending their wastewater to the geysers, had no water left for the farmers who were under contract to use their wastewater. So these are important things to remember when these ideas get discussed on a broad scale.
Right, I appreciate the comments. We'll go next to Alexis.
Excuse me, I'm wondering too, do we touch in any way on floodwater and floodwater capture and any ideas around sort of integrating wastewater capture with floodwater capture? Just because one of my motivations in participating is thinking long range, decades down the way, what would our ancestor, our, children, grandchildren, whatever, would they thank us for what we're doing now? And our area, as we all know, is so thoroughly hit by floods off and on, but then drought. And I know there are burgeoning technologies out there for capturing floodwater as well to use during times of drought and also potentially help mitigate flooding.
Up to staff, is there any discussion in this study of looking at flood capture?
I would suggest that that was not envisioned in the scope of this effort to look at floodwater capture. Not to shoot the idea down with regards to things. I mean, stormwater capture is something Sonoma Water's looked at for many years, and so in other places of the county or along the river, if those things were feasible and we had funding to be able to look at possibilities there, open to those ideas. However, as part of this study, I think it's pretty clear in the ECA that that was not envisioned as part of the scope, and it's not something that Sonoma Water currently has budgeted to evaluate in detail.
I would just add to that, and it's the magnitude of the flooding within the canyon that is Guerneville that poses challenges. And certainly there's opportunities upstream, as Ken alluded to, we're looking very closely at those. But we're talking, on the order of over 100,000 cubic feet per second of water that were making its way past Guerneville during the 1986 flood and the 2019 flood, which was the reason why we're doing the CCA, was slightly less than that, but I believe on the order of 80,000 cubic feet per second. And those discharges will only get higher as we move, forward with future climate. So the ability to capture tens of thousands of cubic feet per second poses very real challenges for our region.
All right, we only have a few more slides left, and then we can circle back to anything else that you all would like to take a look at. So the last thing that we put together, again, this was just designed as a committee or as a kind of kickoff meeting. One of the things that we wanted to put together was a really brief charter document that sort of lays out how you all can function together as a group, what your commitments are for joining on to this effort, and also what staff's commitments are to you to make sure that we're all on the same page before we really launch into it in earnest at your next meeting. So just real quickly, this slide provides a really basic overview of the committee charter. For the purposes of the discussion, we're really going to be focusing on member commitments, the schedule, some of the suggested decision-making possibilities, and staff commitments. But I'll run through each one of the items that you see up here in short order. Our suggestion, and all of this is very much just open to suggestion, it's a draft format. For anybody that was on the initial invite, you received the full charter document. It's only about 3 pages long last week, and again earlier this morning. But our suggestions in terms of your commitments to join the committee are to review all of the materials in advance and attend any meetings. Take information from the committee back to the groups that you represent. We would ask that you report anything that those different groups have or concerns about materials the committee is developing back to the group, this full group at its next meeting, and then contact me if you're unable to attend or if you have any questions or concerns, hopefully in advance of meetings so that we can address any challenges that they come up. Also wanted to run you through the schedule for the group. I know this slide's very busy. There's a lot of text here. It's kind of hard to read through, but I basically just wanted to give you a quick overview that, you know, here we are in Q3, Q4 of 2024. This process is expected to last approximately 2 years. And we expect that the committee is going to meet basically, for the most part, once a quarter. So hopefully not a super heavy lift on your end. In addition to the stakeholder committee, there's also a technical advisory committee that's meeting. That's primarily the engineering community to go over sort of the engineering feasibility of recommendations that come out of this group and out of all the good work that the folks at West Yost and Sonoma Water are doing as well. So, you know, the way that we've sort of envisioned this is that you know, the TAC would come up with some potentially feasible engineering ideas. Those would be bounced then to the committee, and we'd go through sort of an iterative review and refinement of any recommendations before we get all the way down to 2026, where you're starting to review the end of 2025. Where you're really having the opportunity to review and discuss some of the recommended regionalization alternatives, provide your thoughts on it, and then actually take an in-depth look at the draft feasibility study report itself, provide comment, provide refinement, and then, you know, move towards hopefully finalizing that in early 2026. And we'll walk through each line, but that's just a general overview that we have. I'll note that this schedule differs very slightly from the version that was reflected in the charter document that you received. We'll make sure to switch that out in the next version. But just wanted to give you a snapshot of hopefully what you all are able to agree to as far as your commitment for joining the group. I want to talk just a little bit about a potential decision-making structure you could all use as well. The way the document's currently written, it recommends an approach of what we're calling consensus with accountability. And that basically just means that, you know, we're really relying on a good faith effort on all of your parts to reach agreement on recommendations wherever possible. There's sort of a pretty, you know, well-established belief among a variety of regulators, resource agencies, et cetera, that recommendations that come from community groups that represent sort of a consensus of those communities are likely to gain a lot more support for funding and for acceptance in the future. That said, you know, I don't think anybody's, you know, we don't want to be too Pollyanna-ish about it. We acknowledge that, you know, there may be differences of opinion on some things, and wherever consensus isn't possible on a particular recommendation, we really would encourage members to present an alternative proposal. The big commitment that we as staff have to all of you is that all committee feedback, regardless of whether you're supportive of a recommendation or not, is going to be accurately recorded. And that includes individual member positions, any majority proposals, and any minority opinions or alternative recommendations that you might come up with. So hopefully pretty straightforward. Again, the goal here is to always reach agreement wherever possible. Give you, you know, a number of opportunities to refine things before sort of holding final polls on things. But then if you can't, you know, if you can't agree to it, if everybody can't agree to a particular recommendation, then also give you the opportunity to present an alternative for the group's consideration. All right, last slide. Staff commitments. So we asked quite a bit of you in the member commitment slide. Now we want to talk a little bit about what staff can commit to. We will make sure to distribute detailed meeting summaries at least 10 working days after each meeting. We expect those summaries to include a detailed list of action items and any assignments for follow-up. A really clear record of any decisions that you all come to, including any minority opinions, as I just mentioned. roster of the meeting participants, and then a general summary of key takeaways from each discussion. We don't, we're hoping the summaries are going to be really important for generating final reports for the overall committee, but we don't want it to read like a transcript because nobody's going to walk through 15 pages of notes for each one of these sessions. And then finally, we'll make sure to distribute notices and any materials for future meetings at least 5 working days in advance of each meeting. Pretty straightforward there. I'm hoping that folks had a chance to review the charter document in advance. I have a quick poll, and I wanted to sort of try out. I wanted to try out the little decision-making structure that we just provided. So to do that, I'm going to launch a poll here, and I just want you to focus on the first question. So it should pop up on your screen. I'd be very curious to hear from all of you who are invited to join the committee if the commitments and decision-making structures in the draft charter seem appropriate to you. The 3 options that you're provided with are yes, no, or yes, but I think it still needs some more work. Just want to get a read on whether you generally agree with what we're asking of all of you, and whether you agree with what staff's committing to do as well. So we'll leave that open for a few seconds here, and then we can, I think we're probably going to close out fairly early in this meeting. So take a look at that. Staff, certainly welcome you to participate as well. And I'll note, if you select anything besides yes, we'd love to hear what changes you'd like to make to get you to that point where you're supportive of it. So I do see one individual said yes, but further refinement is needed. What would you like to see changed?
Okay.
Maybe, I'm sorry. I thought that was me, but maybe somebody else checked that too.
As did I, but go ahead.
Okay.
As did I, but go ahead.
Perhaps it's beyond the scope of this committee, but did not see anything in the work plan for discussing governance.
Governance in terms of potential water district?
Yes, regional wastewater system. Who is going to govern?
Yeah. So I'd really look to staff that. I see that as, recommendations that would come out of the group's work as opposed to something that's baked into the charter itself. So, perhaps a recommendation specifically around governance.
Okay. Yep.
Decisions.
Then I'm going to change that to yes. There.
Wonderful. All right. I think I saw a hand up from Kyla and Steve as well.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. So I also wanted to clarify from the beginning that I think you had invited me to join this committee, but I'm not. Great, thank you so much. So for me, the question I had is how we can innovate and think creatively if we can't look at alternatives that are already in place or being looked at as being in place. Is that clear?
So does this kind of go back to the conversation that we just had? If I understand correctly, you're kind of raising a concern that you'd like to think of more innovative approaches than what's been discussed for quite some time in the region.
I think that there's quite a few alternatives that are being discussed in the region. That's my experience of it. The county just finished mapping 36,000 septics, which is a really big piece. And it's pretty clear that some areas will work with sewer, some might work with septic or do work with septic and may not be possible to be hooked up. And so I have some concerns about saying we're making a blanket statement for everything. That's my concern.
Okay, understood. Well, I'm hoping that once we see what some of the potential project alternatives are, that we can get into the weeds of the comment that you just made. But I also, I want to recognize, I think you and was it Steve earlier who both raised the question about, the need to potentially look abroad, look at some of the other innovative things that people are doing, and whether or not the ECA actually allows for that. I think it is something we need to take a really hard look at. You heard from staff earlier that they are somewhat limited. The scope is fairly narrow of the ECA. So I'm wondering if we can put a pin in your question there and take a more detailed look at the ECA together as a group, so that you all kind of have an understanding of exactly what Sonoma Water and the Russian River County Sanitation District are being asked to do as part of this study, and where there might be some wiggle room or possibility for innovative approaches. I don't know that there is. I think, Carlos, you were pretty clear earlier that it is fairly, the scope is quite narrow. But I think it would be helpful for the group to hear a little bit more about what the ECA is specifically asking for and what it's not specifically asking for, just so that at the very least we're all on the same page.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Of course. And Steve, I think you had a hand up as well.
Yeah, I did. Just a couple of sort of questions, comments. I would be really clear about the role of the committee in decision-making versus and approvals versus doing something around just providing advice and comment. So expectations aren't, we're not thumbs up or thumbs down. It's like, that sounds good. Or did you ever think of this? I mean, there's a wide river there, forgive the pun. But so as we go through that, it's important for us to know that whether we have decision-making authority on something that the consultants recommend or staff recommends, or whether just we're providing information or we're providing a perspective to that decision. And the other is, as a consensus guy, I'm very interested. I'm a yes, tell me more kind of guy on that, because I don't understand how what you're saying is going to work, but I'm willing to learn.
So I can certainly speak to the latter point there. I have found after quite a few years of doing this at this point that if the community is impacted by any decision, study, whatever it may be, can come to some agreement. It just carries more weight when it goes to the actual regulatory bodies in question and potential funders down the road as well to implement some of these solutions. I
would agree. Consensus is more powerful. I'm just okay if you don't have consensus, then you don't have consensus and you don't have an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. And that's why I kind of introduced this idea that there's sort of a responsibility. If you're not in agreement with the rest of the group, that's totally fine. It's expected. We hope that there are many things that you all can come to agreement on. But if you can't, we'd love to hear an alternative proposal, or at a minimum, why it is you can't be supportive of something. That's, at least in my mind, that's the way that recommendations can be modified to meet the greatest number of needs possible. It's a little bit more time consuming than certainly just a thumbs up, thumbs down majority vote. But hopefully that will give the group enough flexibility to address as many concerns as possible and build the strongest final product as possible.
Yeah, I just said I'm curious about how it's going to work. That's all.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that feedback and little test run. Really appreciate it. To your first point, Steve, a statement on the purpose of the group, I think that's absolutely critical. I'll revise the document to make that more clear moving forward.
We need to know if we're advisory or decision-making. It's a big difference.
Absolutely.
And I would suggest we're probably advisory.
Yes, that's my assumption as well.
I would just weigh in on that and agree as well that it's an advisory role to help guide this process. The regional board, I'm sure, wants to know that we solicited, heard, considered input from stakeholders and tried to accommodate those recommendations wherever practical and within the constraints of the ECA. But I do see it as an advisory role.
So we'll add a statement right up front in that document and clarify it. It is important for everyone to be on the same page there. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Before we wrap up here, I just wanted to provide you with some of the main contact information. You'll see up on the page here. We have Parastu's email as the project manager and engineering lead. Andrea's contact information is the outreach and communications lead, and of course, my contact information is the committee facilitator. If you're unable for any reason to get in touch with Andrea or Paris too, I can make sure to get your communications in front of the right folks. There's also a project website. It's still being built out and will certainly be populated as more and more information is built up. But it is sonomawater.org/West County Study. We can post all this information into the chat as well, so you can just easily cut and paste it. But before I turn it back over to Kent and staff for any closing remarks, I just wanted to see if any of members of the public or committee members had any final thoughts before we wrap up. Okay. Well, Kent, I don't want to put you on the spot, but any closing thoughts or comments? Then we'll
Not much, Sam. You did a terrific job. Thank you so much, and thank you, Paris, too, for your presentation as well. And most of all, thank you so much to, as I mentioned in the opening remarks, thank you so much for your it's time, it's commitment, it's effort, and there are things that it maybe you're hard to reach consensus on things, and we just appreciate you participating in this process. We know there's challenges in dealing with all these issues, so I look forward to our next meeting, and particularly as we begin to develop alternatives and take real tangible steps in considering some of the options here. So just a big thank you to all of you. So with that, thank you.